Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. Before I introduce our guests, I want to give a little background for what you'll hear. Some of you that are active Latter-day Saints may have picked up a conference talk in April of 2022, this most recent conference. Elder Neil Anderson, the title of his talk is Following Jesus, Being a Peacemaker. And in that talk, he referenced, and I'll quote here, in February, a headline in the Arizona Republic stated, bipartisan bill supported by Latter-day Saints would protect gay and transgender Arizonians. We as Latter-day Saints are pleased to be part of a coalition of faith, business, LGBTQ people, and community leaders have worked together in a spirit of trust and mutual respect. President M. Russell Nelson once thoughtfully asked, "Cannot boundary lines exist without becoming battle lines? We endeavor to be peaceful followers of Christ." End quote. And then as I was watching the Deseret News, the local paper here, I think people know that's owned by the LDS Church here in Utah, this is the headline that Tad Walsh, a friend of mine, wrote. Latter-day Saint leaders and LGBTQ advocates deepen their relationship on Washington, D.C. temple tour. And that's where I'll introduce my guests. My two guests are LGBTQ and members from the state of Arizona, but they were both in the Celestial Room as part of this invited VIP tour of our church working with LGBTQ people to find common grounds, and often that's in legal issues with housing and unemployment. So my guests who were in the Celestial Room are now joining us via Zoom, so you can hear more of sort of what's gone in Arizona legally and how those principles can be scaled to other states and even nationally, and even to other issues that tend to divide us, that we can bring the principles that they're applying in real time, in real life, to our lives. So I'm really honored to have these two, I call them kind of community heroes, now national heroes for the trailblazing work they're doing, but Angela Hughey and Michael Soto. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Michael, why don't you go and introduce yourself, how you identify, and the name of the organization you're running. Michael, why don't you go first?
Okay, my name is Michael Soto. I'm the CEO of Equality Arizona, and Equality Arizona is the statewide organization working for the civil rights and civic engagement of LGBTQ people in Arizona. I'm also a transgender man. I identify as queer, and I'm Latino. I was also raised in the church and in the LDS Church, and I often credit the church for my leadership style. I like to say I'm the kind of leader that believes that leaders set up chairs. Leaders are the last to leave. Leaders are people that show up and do the work. And I really credit the LDS Church and my parents for giving me the heart for this kind of work, this kind of service. And I believe it's my calling in life to work for bringing people together in this great nation, in our world, to see each other as humans more, and to work together to accomplish great things together.
Thank you, Michael. Angela.
First and foremost, let me just say thank you so much for giving us both this opportunity, and any time I get to spend with Michael Soto is just a remarkable gift to me. So I'm Angela Hughey. I'm the co-founder and president of One Community. We are a member-based coalition of businesses, faith-based organizations, and everyday Arizonans moving diversity, inclusion, equality for all Arizonans forward. We're probably best known for our bipartisan business coalition building. We have a pledge known as the Unity Pledge. We've had more than 3,400 businesses take the pledge. It's the largest LGBTQ inclusive pledge in the nation. We also have a very large faith-based coalition. We work with 500 faith leaders around the state who are open for worship to everyone. And it's an absolute delight to just be on this remarkable journey organizationally and I think personally with Michael and his remarkable team at Equality Arizona. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm fortunate to be married to a remarkable human being who I co-founded One Community with. We literally emptied out our 401k and launched One Community 13 years ago. So it's an absolute delight to be here. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I think you mentioned you identify as gay.
Yes, it's my umbrella term that I like the best. Yes.
So obviously you're part of the LGBTQ community, and you've been working on legal issues and bridge building issues within the state of Arizona. So I think listeners, we're going to talk about the work that's been done in Arizona. We may start with Mesa and the work that was done there and the church's support there that may surprise listeners. The church proactively got involved in what happened in Mesa and what's happening in Arizona and has in other states. And that's what Elder Anderson referenced in his general conference talk. And so I think it's good for those of you that are Latter Saints to be aware of what's happened here and ask ourselves, what can we do in our circle of influence, even if it's not legal, to use the things that we'll talk about in this podcast to bring us together as the same human family. And listeners, I talk about this a lot. Zion to me isn't sameness anymore. There's a lot of differences between the three of us on this podcast right now. Zion is coming together like the city of Enoch to lift the hands of the poor and be unified in common goals as the same human family, to leave suffering. And there's a lot of suffering in the world in a lot of different spaces. And this space could be a space of tremendous pain, and is at times, but it can be a space where people can come together and solve complex issues. And the church is supportive of that. So I'll just do you want to start with Mesa and do you want to talk about
Sure.
the Mesa story? Is that a good place to start?
We love talking about Mesa.
Okay,
So I was fortunate enough to meet Mayor John Giles, who is the mayor of Mesa, now 8 years ago. And he had taken office, and I think we were fortunate enough to have a sit down in his office about 10 days into him being the mayor of Mesa. And on his whiteboard, he had his top priorities. And his number one priority was passing an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance in Mesa. And so we've had the pleasure of walking alongside Mayor Giles now for the last 8 years. But the opportunity to pass an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance came upon us, and the vote was March 1st of last year. And so in wonderful collaboration with our organizations, One Community and Equality Arizona, we supported the mayor and his courageous council in their efforts. And the ordinance was passed on May 1st. But 3 days after the ordinance passed, an anti-LGBTQ based organization started a PAC known as United for Mesa and began signature collecting to put the Mesa ordinance on the ballot. And if they had been successful, it would be on the ballot this coming November. So our organizations created our own PAC known as Mesa Loves Everyone. And we worked with folks throughout Mesa and business leaders and community leaders. And Michael, we had a whole group of volunteers that were really verifying signatures. And why don't you kind of pick up the baton from there and talk about how that went?
Got it, my friend. We had this amazing group of volunteers, folks who are citizens or residents of the city of Mesa, folks who care deeply about Mesa, and people who are members of the LDS church, largely, actually, and people who came together and said, through the amazing example of Mayor Giles and his family, through Councilwoman Spilsbury, right, through all of these incredible leaders in Mesa, had an opportunity to learn about why this ordinance was so important and would increase the quality of life for every Mesa resident. And we had these wonderful folks that were, a part of the signature process is that we got the opportunity to look at the signatures and to help in that verifying process. And that was our job, right? As they collected the signatures, it was our job to make sure they were real and legitimate, because there are lots of rules in terms of how you collect signatures. And what we found, luckily, because we did have so many Mesa citizens and residents involved, they knew the folks who were signing these signatures, right? They knew where they lived. They knew all of these things. They're their neighbors, right? And so we were able to find a lot of inconsistencies, actually, and we're able to present a very strong case to the opposition through our amazing legal representation, and with the help of our volunteers that said, hey, y'all actually didn't follow the rules. You didn't get enough signatures according to the rules, and we're going to say that openly, and gave them the option. We can either take this all the way and keep going in this process, or you can concede and we can all move on, and you can go do other things, and the bill will, the ordinance will become law. And fortunately, they conceded. That was a wonderful day. We were all very pleased when that happened, and the ordinance became the law in the city of Mesa. And wow, what an incredible day! And that was almost a year ago now. And so, yeah.
Yeah, almost a year ago. And here's what's amazing. Mesa is the most conservative large city in the nation. But also in the midst of this signature gathering, we were introduced to leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And our organizations and the church and other bishops from many other denominations around Arizona put out a joint statement. But it was a very historic statement from an LDS perspective, because it was the first time that the church came out in support of not just employment and housing protections for LGBTQ people, but also public accommodations, right? And so we met during a very vulnerable time and created this remarkable, trusting relationship that after we were able to celebrate the ordinance actually taking place and going into law, as Michael said, in June of last year, we were able to then forge what has become, I would say, a really beautiful friendship and fellowship with so many members of the church. It's been just a remarkable experience for us.
It has, and we got to celebrate this bill becoming, or this ordinance becoming law when it became law. But then we got to celebrate again when the church invited us to bring LGBTQ leaders from Arizona and across the country to the city of Mesa for the Mesa Temple opening in the fall. That was actually the first time we visited a temple together and went on a very special tour. There were two of the 12 apostles were there, Elder Razband and Elder Gong, and they actually each led the tours that we went on. There were two groups. There were so many people. And it was such a special and beautiful experience. And as you mentioned, we just got back from DC, where we got to visit the temple there with another group of about 40 LGBTQ people from around the country, touring the DC temple. And we were able to meet Elder Bednard, which was just delightful. And Elder Gerard led our tour, which was a wonderful experience. He's become a dear friend at this point.
And listeners, it's worth just pausing and recognizing that Latter-day Saints, we feel those temples are pretty important spaces that are, I don't know what words, our holiest houses to our heavenly parents, to our Savior, where those ordinances are performed. And once they're dedicated, you need to have a temple recommend to come in, but it's just worth noting that our leaders wanted you there, and proactively led tours. Our senior leaders invited you to the celestial room, and wanted you to be in that room. And I think there's symbolism there for how we should treat our LGBTQ friends. You don't need a temple recommend to be in our home or go out to lunch with. Sometimes there's this, our culture sometimes shouldn't reflect the temple recommend, I think, where we only associate with people that are following the exact same rules, and our culture is like that. But I think what's taught there is that we're all the same human family. We seek each other for the gifts and the contributions and welcome people wherever they are and work together. And the symbolism of being proactively invited into the temple, to me, causes us all to reflect on what does that mean for me in my circle of influence. If I'm a local LDS leader, a parent, what can I do to symbolize welcoming for LGBTQ people? And what can I do in my area of influence to build bridges? So that's terrific. I want to read from the Deseret News, because James and Monica Phillips. They were the ones that actually encouraged me to do this podcast. And I think along with the Braddocks, they went with you to DC. And this is quoting from the Desert News, and listeners will listen. We'll link to this in the podcast. Just as James Phillips talking about you, Michael's a great collaborator in that he brings people across lines. James Phillips said, "There's not many forums when you can sit with people from both sides and talk about solutions in the middle that actually affect change, where you can see lasting changes that affect all things that are most precious to us." So it was an opportunity we couldn't pass up, not only as parents, but as passionate advocates in this space. And earlier in the article, it mentions the Phillips are parents of 2 LGBTQ children in Mesa. Monica said her family is central, so she focused on loving her children and trusting God. And then Monica goes on, "This was a dream come true, to be in this room with my LGBTQ friends and my church," she said after the tour and lunch. So just how much that meant to the Phillips and probably the Braddocks. I don't see they were quoted in this article, but I think they felt the same way. And listeners, just more on Mayor Giles and Council. Would you introduce Councilwoman Julia Spilsbury to us? I'm sure all the council members you could talk about, but Julia Spilsbury is just somebody that I know and have gotten to know, and introduce her to our listeners too.
Sure. Julie's remarkable. And she's a freshman council member. So this LGBTQ inclusive ordinance vote was one of the first votes that she took as a newly seated council person. But she also received over 1,000 emails. Many of these emails were from people that share her faith, really encouraging her to vote no on the LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. So this was a very transformative vote for Councilmember Spilsbury. She was deeply emotional when she took the vote and said, "I have had the opportunity to experience just a little bit of the hate that LGBTQ people have felt as we've moved towards this vote." And it was just a deeply impactful and important vote for her.
And listeners that are LDS, you may be aware of the Faith Matters podcast. About a year ago, Mayor John Giles was on that podcast. He's episode 75. And then Julie and Jeremy Spilsbury joined the Faith Matters. I believe that was Tim and Aubrey Chavez that hosted both of those, episode 77. So you could hear more if you want to, listeners, just the journey. And you framed that up pretty well, Angela, from what I know. And I've gotten to know Julie and Jeremy, and I've traded a few emails with Mayor Giles, and they're just terrific. I want to just highlight LDS people that are doing this. This is an LDS podcast, but it's a broad coalition of people coming together. Talk about two things back to the Mesa also. I understand and employment. I get that. I get housing. But you said this went a little further because it went into public spaces. I think that's the vocabulary. Maybe listeners are like me that don't quite know what that means. Will one of you take a moment to explain that?
Sure. Public accommodations, it touches so much of our lives in terms of experiencing life in public. And so it's the ability to go into a restaurant or a store and be treated equally like everyone else, be served, be welcomed, be able to shop, be able to sit at the same lunch counter as everyone else, right? Being able to go to a hospital and in an emergency room, not be discriminated against because of who you are. These are really foundational things to human experience and human life. And, we learned this in the civil rights movement. I mean, public accommodations is a big struggle there too, right? I mean, that's what the lunch counter sit-ins were all about, right? That's what we know, that separate but equal isn't good enough in this country. We found that out through many, many years of hard and difficult struggle. And so the principle there is very simple in public accommodations, that everybody should be treated the same in public life. Separate is not equal. And so that's the same thing that we stand for. And Angela has a great saying around this. You want to say it?
Oh, well, we have our open for business to everyone slogan, which we came up with, several years ago. So there's signs all over Arizona with businesses and restaurants and just anything that has a door on it basically is a public accommodation. And that includes public restrooms as well, right? And so we want to make sure that LGBTQ people, as Michael said so beautifully, have equal access and just to also the opportunity to live our lives openly is who we are, right? And so, we love folks that are open for business to everyone.
We do.
Talk about why the church got involved, and maybe I should have the church leaders talk about it, but I think you can probably do a good job because at some point the church leaders proactively entered this space and it was no longer just Mayor Giles and Councilwoman Spilsbury and other local LDS leaders. The church from the senior levels got involved, and I think local church leaders, I think perhaps in Area Authority 70 is the right language, got involved, and the church issued a statement, especially at the time of this this signature gathering. Why did the church do that?
The church can probably speak more to that, but I think from my understanding, I can share the biggest reason. I think what I've heard from them, from our dear friends in the church, and simply put, that's Matthew 22, verse 34 through 40, right? Jesus said unto him, "Thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." It's those two commandments that is at the root of this for the church, for the amazing people that we've worked with in the church. And that shared love for one another is how we have built a beautiful relationship with members of the church, with leaders of the church. And we always come back to that when we're meeting with the amazing folks that we get to work with in the church. That love, that commandment from God to love one another, to serve one another, right? To find that common humanity and purpose in one another and to work together for the greater good of all of us. And we really saw that right away in their hearts, in the kind, open way that the church leaders came to us, the intentional way that they built relationship with us. Two of our dear friends have received new callings, and so they're going to be leaving Arizona. And I think we're both really sad because we love them so much. They're like family now, and we will be visiting. Like Ange and I are going to go to Iowa.
I'm going to learn how to make bricks, right?
We're going to go to Nauvoo.
We're going to Nauvoo. We're in.
We're these folks are so amazing, and we're lifelong friends now. And we want, it's been that, I think that kind of genuine, that's real love, right? That is truly being in not just the work, but being in this life together with people. And that's been our experience, is just that genuine love. And we've felt that every time we've been with the church, every temple tour, every time we've been to Salt Lake, we feel that so strongly. And I hope they feel that from us as well, because we love this relationship and we love the work that we get to do together.
We do. And I want to add, I think you find out who people really are when you're vulnerable. And I don't think we could have been more vulnerable than we were when the Mesa Ordinance was under fire, with a very strong, deep-pocketed opponent that was determined to overturn this ordinance. And so to meet, and oddly enough, it was over, it's funny to me, in the midst of COVID, because it was conference calls. So we never even saw one another. But we created a joint statement. We trusted one another in this really, really vulnerable moment when we were taking in heavy water, I would say, and it was like being in a battle for our lives and our collective souls in the city of Mesa. And so to trust one another, in such a vulnerable moment, I think has forged, as Michael is saying, that not just a beautiful friendship, but this true sense of family and purpose, collective purpose for all of us, that has made us all better. Like it's changed all of us for the better. And I feel that our collective family and chosen family of friends is larger, and we are so welcomed by our friends in the church. And it's just been an absolutely transformative, remarkable journey. And we're very blessed to be on it.
That's a great segment. I mean, you're a transgender man, Michael. We say unkind things about our trans friends in lots of circles, and you've been the recipient of many of those painful comments. And you're in a same-sex marriage, Angela. And so I just recognize that these leaders came into your lives, and it doesn't seem to feel like they just loved you because you deserve to be loved. It doesn't seem like there was a condition on that, or we're only going to love you, Michael, if you return to full activity in the church. And I think there's principles there that are embedded in the doctrine of Christ, just to love people because they deserve to be loved. This unconditional love, and how helpful and healing that was to both of you to have all these LDS people and other faiths come into your life and support you and just see you as human beings and part of the same human family, and honor your personal choices and try to find common ground to lift the burdens of others, like the people in the city of Enoch. Now, I'm not inferring that Mace is going to get translated like the city of Enoch did, but there's a principle there that particularly LGBTQ people, with the legislations there, that's lifted the burdens, it's lifted the hands of poor, which to me represents those that have a harder road and need people with more privilege and government entities that have the ability to pass laws to step in and do things that individual people can't do themselves, that are part of all the margins of society. That to me is part of the doctrine of Christ. So I think that what's happened in Mesa is terrific. But talk about, I've got a note here that, listeners, I think word association is when I say a word and you think of something that comes to mind next. So if I say Oreos, you might think of milk, or I don't know. If I say baseball, you may think of your favorite baseball team. But I think if we, as a church culture, and this is changing, think of gay people or trans people, we think of we're under attack. We think our religious freedoms are under attack. We sometimes think of a group of people that's unified against us, and our cultures, and some of that's internally our own fault, but our culture sort of, sometimes that's what comes to our mind. And part of the purpose of this podcast is to help see LGBTQ people as our own family members, as our own people in our congregation, and not this group of people that is attacking us. Now, sure, there's some gay people that want the church to fail, but there's straight people that want the church to fail. So just pinning it on one group isn't fair. And so one of the things I think that is helpful about what happened in Mesa is to not, every time we hear the word our religious freedoms, is to think, oh, that means gay people are trying to take something away from me. I think if we talk about religious freedoms, and we as a church need to protect those, we need to identify who is the threat and what is under attack. Otherwise, it's kind of left out there. And most rank and file members like me would have just thought, well, that means I got to pull away from gay people because somehow they're impacting my religious freedoms. So that's one of the things I love about Mesa, is it's causing us to look inward and say, okay, what's really is under attack there and what isn't? And what do LGBTQ groups, like the two groups that you represent, are actually trying to protect in the LDS Church as part of this legislation? And this is just where we know better, we do better. And instead of throwing bombs at the other side, there's sort of fear-based, non-fact-based stuff. We can have fact-based discussions and keep the fear out of it. Politics on both sides has a lot of that. So I don't know. I'll just kind of turn it back to you. You could talk about any of that resonates with you.
Something that resonates with me really deeply is that this idea of two different communities, right, of people of faith and LGBTQ people. And the truth is that there are a lot of LGBTQ people who are also people of faith, deep faith, who are practicing actively in their faith, who are doing that formally through churches and religious institutions, and doing that in their personal lives, and have a deep connection with God. And so that is such an important thing to remember. We are members of families of faith. We are people of faith. We're LGBTQ people. Those aren't mutually exclusive things. And and in addition to that, we are also all Americans. We're part of a great pluralistic society. And that is such a strength and such a unique and wonderful thing, and something that makes this country one of the greatest places to have existed in human history, is that pluralistic society where we can be different and we can still be Americans, and we can still work for the common good and for a common cause. And I think that's what this work at the city level, at the state level, and at the national level exemplifies. We can be different people from different communities, and we can come together and we can fight for the greatest of American ideals: personal freedom and individual freedom, and religious freedom. Those two things are complementary. Our founding fathers knew it. The greatest minds and scholars of this country have always known it. American citizens know it, and we know it. And we're here to work for both of those things.
That was great, Michael. Angela.
I was going to say, remind me not to follow Michael anymore. It's very difficult. But we talked about this when we were just in Washington, D.C., that religious liberty and LGBTQ liberty can go hand in hand, right? And that is really the work that we're doing collaboratively together. And I know Michael talked a little bit about, through the Mesa Ordinance, we wound up bringing LGBTQ leaders from around the United States to take a private tour of the Mesa Temple, and we met with a select group of folks last October prior to that tour, and we had put our heads together and come up with what we see as the bridge to have LGBTQ inclusive protections while keeping existing religious freedom protections in place. And we call that framework our Equality and Fairness for All Americans framework. And so we introduced that in October, and have had remarkable conversations with folks that are center-right, that understand that LGBTQ Americans do deserve the same protections as other Americans in employment and housing and public accommodations and credit and jury service. And one of the things that makes our framework different than the Equality Act framework that has been introduced since 2015 is that we want to ensure that faith-based social services keep their federal funding, right? And so our belief is, when we look at these ordinances such as Mesa and the 330 LGBTQ inclusive ordinances around the United States, they all have religious freedom protections in them. When we look at the 20 state-based LGBTQ inclusive policies in place, they all have religious freedom protections in them. And we believe that we can just bring that up to the federal level. We can protect LGBTQ Americans, make sure that we have that same opportunity of the pursuit of happiness and to provide for our families and our loved ones, and also can continue to protect religious freedoms. That the answer truly is that we have the opportunity to unite folks, and that we believe that this is the bipartisan solution that should we be successful, be the largest civil rights update since 1964. And we think that our great nation needs this right now, that we need an opportunity to come together. And as Michael said, this is not a zero-sum game. For us to have the same protections as our non-LGBTQ counterparts, we don't need to take anything away from anyone. We just need to have the same opportunities.
Oh, I love that. You're right. I mean, it's not a zero-sum game. Giving you permission to live your life the way you feel is best doesn't cost me anything, or our family anything. And so I think the fear out of that and the fact-based discussion that you two are leading is very helpful. Listeners, I tried to get educated before we went live, because I'm not following all the legislation, but and Angela just mentioned this, but I just want to be clear. Angela just talked about equality and fairness for all Americans. That is hopes to be a national law. There are two national sort of potential laws that are being debated. You mentioned Equality Act. That's one that I'm aware of, and Fairness for All Americans, which is another one that I'm not sure we've mentioned yet. So those are two existing ones. And I think before we went live, you mentioned that Equality Act is perhaps left center and Fairness for All Americans perhaps is right center. I'm not sure I got that right, but I sense that this is more, even though there are probably listeners that like or don't like both of those existing ones, just give contrast to how this is different. So that listeners that are aware of both of those that have sort of been debated, I think, in Congress are aware of this new one that you're bringing forth and your organizations into other states, into Arizona. It's being debated. It has been in the last legislative session in Arizona been debated, so it could become the law in all of Arizona as well as potentially the law in all of America. Give more just background and context.
So the Equality and Fairness for All Americans framework is actually a combination of both of these bills. And so what happened is that, we looked at these two pieces of legislation that were moving forward in Congress, and we saw lots of great things in both of them. And we said, what would be really great to do if we want to actually get a bipartisan bill introduced and through the finish line to become law. Let's take the great things in both of these bills and let's put them together. Let's make the bill even stronger, and let's get to a point where we are protecting everyone through this bill, not choosing just one community to protect, and so, or one type of individual. And so we took about 40% of the Equality Act, 40% of the Fairness for All Act, and then we added 20% new. And the 20% new includes a national ban on conversion therapy for minors. And it brings down the employment protection number for any civil rights protections to kick in from 15 to 0, which is very important to us. And I'll let Angela speak more about why that's so important.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so current federal legislation protects American workers based on all types of human characteristics and your religious beliefs if you work for a business or organization that has 15 or more employees. But that leaves a whole host of Americans that do not have employment non-discrimination protections because America is built on small business, right? And so we want to make sure that every American worker has the same opportunity to have non-discrimination protections, not just based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, but based on their religious belief or non-belief, based on all the other human characteristics, race, age, disability that are federally protected. We think it's important, really, to bring our great nation together to make sure that everyone that is participating in a sustainable economy has the same protections, right? And so we're very excited about the opportunities of equality and fairness for all Americans in this bipartisan framework. It's not center left, it's not center right. We have this saying, we like to say courageous center. So we believe that this framework is all about the courageous center coming together, meeting in the things that we can agree with, and moving our great nation forward so that every American has the same protections.
Exactly. And so this bill will protect people of faith. This bill is pro-business, and this bill protects LGBTQ people. And so for us, in a lot of ways, that's doing a lot of amazing work and in one piece of incredible legislation. And it's something that we hope really brings that piece that I was talking about earlier of we are this pluralistic society and we can work for great things together. And this bill is a framework for how to do that and a model for how to do that.
It is. And to add to Michael's point about being pro-business, we live in a global economy now, and the attraction and retention of top talent throughout our great nation is so important. We have a talent shortage throughout Arizona and throughout America right now. So we want to make sure that we are creating a space in this nation where no matter who you are, who you love, or where you come from, we are bringing the best and brightest into the American workforce, so that we are really truly creating this sustainable model to move our nation forward. So it's just a bunch of pluses. There's no minuses in any of this.
Listeners, that's called Equality and Fairness for All Americans, and share where people can read more about this.
Oh, equalityandfairness.com. It's pretty simple.
Love that. So I sometimes see things, listeners, that are like a pebble that hits a lake, and the way, whatever that's called, the waves, ripples go out. And to me, what happened in Mesa is that. And it's brave people that have stepped forward from all walks of life that have said, we're going. Sometimes it's harder to try to find common ground versus just be bomb throwers on the to the other side. And you get heat from people that say, well, we want to be bomb throwers. We don't want to be sort of working like this, and feel that's selling out either their political party or their religion. But I think it's the doctrine of Christ, listeners, to do what you all doing. But then I love the scalability of what you're doing and the vision for both of you as you're working together, and then trying to work within the state of Arizona to pass this. But then you didn't just stop there. You're talking about a national law that I think a lot of Americans can get behind. And I do recognize, and I don't know all the nuance of how things work at the federal level, but I do been aware of these two, the Equality Act and the Fairness for All Americans, but I've recognized that it seems like they stall in either side of the legislature. And so I hope that, I just hope that there's more legal things passed providing protection for people. This is a question I asked before we went on. You had great answers. There are probably LGBTQ people that have felt incredible pain from their faith institutions, from friends, from political parties. Where there's pain, there's anger. And anger can be directed at those very institutions. And you may have felt some of that. And some listeners may feel incredible pain and anger towards their faith communities, towards their families. And rightly so, because they've been really wounded. And perhaps they do want to heal and move forward and recognize that they've got to figure out a way to do kind of what you two are doing. Do you want to give any personal advice or any insights? I'm sure you have lots of conversations like this with people. Just if you've got any thoughts for those people walking that road, give us some ideas.
I'd be happy to share a little bit of my story. I was raised in an LDS family, and I came out at 19. And my parents, this was a long time ago now, and so the internet was brand new, and there wasn't the widespread discussion of LGBTQ people. I didn't even know that acronym until right before I came out. That was something that was new in my world. And so, my parents didn't understand, and they were really afraid is what it came down to. And they couldn't see my life anymore, right? When I came out as transgender, as queer, they didn't know what my adult life would look like or who I would become. And so their response, as members of the church and as relatively conservative people and people who had never been a part of the LGBTQ community, was to respond by saying, no, we can't accept that. That's dangerous. We don't understand this at all. And, I was a teenager. I got angry, of course. And my response was, you can't be a part of my life. And instead of staying in relationship with them, I left that relationship, and they left our relationship. And so for almost 10 years, we didn't really talk to one another. We saw each other very sporadically, sort of at random family things like funerals and all of that kind of stuff. But in those sort of brief glimpses of time, my parents and I, sort of found ways to connect a tiny bit at those family functions or in those emergency situations and those sorts of things. And then we would leave again, but the thought always returned that we should try to connect again. And so we tried at different times, and I tried or they tried, and we weren't ready yet. But eventually, when I was about 29, my father came here actually to Arizona for his high school reunion, and I picked him up from the airport. He asked me if I would pick him up, and I drove him to Coolidge, and we talked a little bit, but not a lot. And then I picked him up from Coolidge to take him back to the airport about a day before he had to go back, and he asked to spend the day with me. And I took him to work with me. I introduced him to some friends at dinner, and he asked a lot of questions, and I asked him questions, and it was okay. We both had kind of our guard up still, but we were trying. And when he went home to St. Louis, I got an email a couple hours after he got home, where he just said, and he started the email by saying, "I want you to know that I love you." It was like, and I know I don't tell you that enough. My father only told me that once in my entire life. And that's when I took you to meet him when you were a baby. And he said, "I am so sorry that I haven't been your ally." He said, "I didn't understand, and I'm working to understand." It's like, but what I see in you is that you are exactly the person that I wanted you to be.
Wow.
And I'm so proud of you. And yeah, I get a little emotional because my dad has passed. But we found our way back to one another and to being a father and a son. And my mom and I found the way back to each other and to being a mom and a son. And she actually lives with me now. She has for 11 years. But we were able to heal our relationship and the pain by loving each other and by believing that we could be a family, and by being in a relationship with one another, by listening to each other, by asking questions, by not judging each other, and by truly living by the commandments to love one another first. And my dad passed away a few months before this work began. And I really believe that, I don't know, something divine out there has made that possible, and that he's been looking out for me this whole time, as well as God, and helping me on this path and helping me to find amazing people like Angela, who walk beside me and do this work with me and will always be in my life, and members of the church doing this work with us. It's been the most powerful experience of my life. And it is all about keeping that love for other people front and center, and trusting it to guide us, and trusting God to guide us.
That was awesome, Michael. Thank you. Angela?
Michael, I just want to say your father is smiling at you right now.
Your friend.
So I, had a difficult journey coming out, and my mom kind of said to me, if you tell my family, I'll never talk to you again. And that was 30 years ago, and she's been true to her word. And I'm sorry for her, because I think she's missed out on, I'm a pretty cool person, and she's missed out on that experience. And I wish her well. And I came to a place, and my father struggled with it, and his wife. But to Michael's point, we and I'm an incredibly stubborn person too. So we certainly have had some standoffs over the years. But we keep coming back, and we love one another. And I think that my relationship with my dad and Sandy, who they've been married for 30 years, and my sister Amy. So we are a blended family that has been blended for, over 3 decades, is stronger and closer than it's ever been. And I am incredibly fortunate because, while I went through great trauma and was very broken, I met a remarkable human being, my wife, who I've been on just an amazing journey with for 28 years. It's remarkable. So we've spent more than half of our lives together. I'm not telling you my age, but it's been quite a journey for the two of us. And I think that we are healthier, mentally healthier, and healthier as a family than we've ever been, because no matter what the struggle was, we just never gave up. And our love has found a way through so many of the difficult things. And those difficult journeys have made us who we are. And I really like who we are. And so I'm grateful for all of the work that we've done in the past that we've been on. And I think what I've learned along the way is people act out based on their experiences and what they know. And we've all had different lived experiences. And so if we make this decision to not judge anyone, and we understand really the world that through their eyes and their lived experiences, we can meet people where they're at. We can not take things personally, but understand that whatever it is that someone is saying or doing is a reflection of their lived experiences. And it's not necessarily about us. it is about them and their fears and their insecurities and just not understanding. And so if I come into this space and I'm not judgmental, but I am here to listen and to understand and to ask questions and say, I may not have the answer, but I will walk alongside of you, then we can heal together. And so I'm incredibly grateful for this work that we're doing. And I tell Michael so often that how incredibly grateful I am to walk alongside him and for this really, really beautiful collaborative journey. And I know that we are all better because we're doing this work together, and our teams are better, and we're a family. We love one another, and we're better every day because we do the best we can every day, and the world gets better every day.
It does. And I just want to say, I love you. I adore you. And you have taught me so much about being just a strong and loving person. And you and your wife are life goals for me, by the way. I just, after seeing your beautiful marriage, I don't think I could ever settle for anything that is not just as supportive and loving and kind. So I hope everybody someday gets to see this beautiful, amazing couple in action, because they are incredible.
Well, thank you for telling some of your personal story on behalf of our listeners. That I love both of those stories. There's so much hope and grace and reality and pain. I'm glad you're open with your mother, Angela, and I think that's okay for other people to hear that not everybody's going to be in a situation where every family member is going to support them, and it's going to be the reality. And so you've found sometimes you have to have boundaries too, where you just need to separate yourself from people that aren't going to be supportive or perhaps are even toxic to you. And that's an important principle in all of our lives, and doesn't mean you're not a loving person and you're trying to honor the commandments. You need to separate yourself at times from somebody that's toxic, and it may be a family member, and it may be out of preserving your own health. But I love the word trauma and pain, and I love, Angela, you talking about how your wife helped heal you, and that's been part of your road to be able to now accomplish the things that you're both are doing right now as supportive people in your lives, whether it's your spouse, Angela, or the people in your life, Michael, that relationship with your father and your mother living with you. But our Desert News quoted you, Angela. You kind of mentioned this. This is back to the article by Tad Walsh we'll reference in the show notes. And Angela Hughey said, quote, "What keeps us in conflict is we don't understand one another. So we meet each other in places of safety and equality, and we're able to come together and learn about each other's history and culture. It brings us together and creates a common bond of humanity." And then you go on to be quoted as listening and understanding are keys, which is what you said. So the platform of this podcast is Listen, Learn, and Love, which has been my own journey to understand LGBTQ people, because I had to be willing to learn and maybe realize that I was wrong. I like the song. There's a line in Beauty and the Beast. Learning you were wrong is actually the phrase in there. I can't remember the word, and it's an okay thing to learn you were wrong, because then you realize that you can do a better job of lifting the burdens of others. But I realized I had to listen to LGBTQ people to sort of recognize the areas that I needed to prove in, or perhaps the areas I was wrong with my assumptions. So I think that's part of the beautiful work you're both doing. More thoughts. We've got 10 more minutes. Any more thoughts that come into your mind that you'd like to share with listeners?
Well, I'd love if we could share a little bit about the federal work that we're doing over the next couple of weeks. Awesome.
Because that's real time needed. So that's big focus of this podcast. So let's get that in. Go, Michael.
Love it. So this is definitely a bit of a call to action for anyone who is so inclined. But our amazing organizations and the coalition that we co-founded, Equality and Fairness for All Americans Coalition, we are working to win federal policy by the end of June, because we know that Congress is going to switch to midterm elections after June, and we want to make sure to get this done. We know that it's possible because we have been working with people across the country and organizations across the country to build bipartisan support. And we believe that with this framework of bringing the best of the Equality Act and the best of the Fairness for All Act together for a bill that both protects LGBTQ people comprehensively in employment, housing, and public accommodations, and protects religious freedom and liberty, we will be able to do that. And that will be a monumental thing, a historic thing, a historic update, generational update to the Civil Rights Act, and to upholding the greatest freedoms of this country, and the greatest ideals of this country. And so we are asking folks to get involved with that. And one of the most important ways is by going to our website and signing on. You can do that as an individual person, as a business owner. You can do that as a person of faith, as organizations of faith. And you can say that you support this. And you can show that support by signing up on the website, because it populates a public roll call, as it were, so that people from across the country and members of the Senate and Congress can see that Americans from every walk of life support this work. That's what they need to see, that this isn't about partisan politics. This isn't about us versus them. This is about us together as Americans being audacious enough to create a more perfect union by creating laws that include all of us and protect all of us. And so we're asking folks to do that as soon as you can. As soon as you hear this, please log on to the website, sign on and support in every way that you can. Share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, tell everybody about it, shout it from the rooftops, because we need people to be out there evangelizing in some ways, right, for this work and for these principles that move all of us forward as a society. We're going to be doing a whole lot of work around that. Please follow our organizations, follow our coalition, and join in that work with us.
And we'll put that website in the show notes, listeners. Go ahead, Angela.
Well, I just want to say, I echo everything Michael says. It literally takes 1 minute to sign the Equality and Fairness for All Americans pledge at equalityandfairness.com. But then as soon as you sign, you will receive an email with a link that will send a note to your elected officials, letting them know that you support equality and fairness for all Americans. So we're asking for 2 minutes of your life for the opportunity to engage in what is an incredibly important bipartisan dialogue to truly bring equality and fairness to all Americans, to protect LGBTQ Americans once and for all in this great nation, and also to give us a chance to heal as a nation, right? To meet together and come together to really push forward the largest civil rights update since 1964. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. To Michael's point, tell your friends, tell your family. This is what we hope that you were talking about around your kitchen table and during your family meals. And we have a very limited window. So in order to pass federal protections, we think the window is June 24th of this year. And we think if we're not able to pass federal protections by June 24th, that the next opportunity for federal protections is likely a decade away. We also have concerns about some upcoming Supreme Court cases, which could make it harder to pass federal protections, in particular in public accommodations. And so this is an urgent request. It is 2 minutes, and you can help us move our great nation forward.
Thank you. June 30th, June 24th, listeners. This podcast is coming out in mid-May, so that gives you all of us time to do that. But let's do it as soon. My experience is if I hear a podcast and I'll say I'll do that in a day or two, I'm less likely to do it. If I hear a podcast and could look in the show notes and see a clickable link and then go right to equalityandfairness.org.com.
.com. Yeah.
equalityandfairness.com, and do the things that Angela and Michael just suggested. That for me is the way things happen. And I invite all our listeners to do this and to work to make a difference in this area. To me, for those that are LDS, for me, it's part of my baptism covenants. To mourn, bear, and comfort. It's part of living the gospel of Jesus Christ, the second great commandment, which to me, I think they're one equal co-commandment. To love God with all our heart is to love our fellow men as ourselves. And I sometimes think we set up this false dichotomy in our minds that to fully love and follow God, we have to stop loving some of his children. But I just think we complicate the gospel when we think that way. with the exception of toxic people in our lives and having boundaries. And there's great scriptures that talk about, doing it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And so I don't look at LGBTQ as the least. I look at them as some of my heroes, and the things they've taught me about principles to bring us together, the same human family, and compassion, empathy, and kindness. But they've been pushed on to the margins of society, and so it's our job to help go out and bring people in that have a harder road, and they need legal protection, and they need allies to accomplish this. And that not only benefits our LGBTQ friends, but I think it's part of creating Zion, or part of the body of Christ, where every part of the body of Christ is needed. So our businesses are better off, our religions are better off to have LGBTQ people as part of these organizations, our families. It strengthens our families. It's back to, I thought Zion was sameness. It's Elder Cook talked about diversity and unity. It's unity. So then we can go and accomplish good in the world that may not be possible without the differences that are part of just who we are in a good way, to be able to then make a real difference. So those are just some thoughts. Any final thoughts from either of you?
I just wanted to share one final thing, and it goes back to the DC Temple tour. Angela and I had the honor and privilege of being in a group led by Elder Gerard and Sister Eubank. And Sister Eubank shared something really important with us, and we've met her twice now, and we just adore her. She's incredible, such a welcoming and loving spirit. She shared with us something that I think relates to why doing this work makes sense for the LGBTQ community and the LDS community, and why fellowship between our communities and amongst our community together is so natural in some ways and so important. She talked to us. We were at the changing room area, and she said to us, one of the most important principles of the temple is that in the temple, everyone is equal. And she talked to us about the white clothing and how that is that seeing everyone in the temple as equal is such a core part of being in the temple, experiencing the temple, and being an LDS person of faith. And that meant so much to all of us on the tour and spoke to our hearts as well, because for Angela and I, that's our goal too, is to create a world where everyone is equal, where we see each other as siblings, as brothers and sisters, as family, and we are working together for that full equality together, so that our world is a better and richer place. And that just really, it meant everything to us, I think, and it spoke to our hearts. And we feel that from the LDS community that we've been working with, that love, that equal treatment, that Kendra Johnson, another executive director in our coalition, she is actually on a video with an LDS newsroom video talking about how her experience with the church has been so phenomenal, because as a Black lesbian, everyone meets her in the eye, looks her in the eye, and treats her with so much love and equality. And I hope that everyone listening to this podcast can think about that and can bring that kind of love and equality to every interaction you have with everyone, especially LGBTQ people, and I hope that our community does the same. And we are here to make that happen.
That was a great segment. And I think if we're wondering if hanging out with LGBTQ people is okay, I hope we've just heard multiple stories of senior leaders in our church. Hanging out's kind of a casual term, but I do recognize you're a transgender man, and we sometimes say pretty unkind things about our trans friends, and it's kind of fear-based narratives around. I don't even want to use some of the language you've heard to trigger you. But I love just the kindness Sister Eubank extended to you, and that you two have both been part of the Washington, D.C. and Mesa temple dedications, and multiple church leaders over and over have just seen you for who you are. And Elder Anderson used the word transgender in general conference. He used LGBTQ. That's appropriate vocabulary that we're learning to just normalize, because I sort of think God normalized this in the first place by creating people this way. I don't think I think everybody's sort of created as intended. And that's part of the needed, beautiful diversity that creates harmony in our work, in our world when we work together. So there's a lot of sort of principles that have sort of indirectly been brought into this podcast because of your interaction with senior leaders of our church and how they're treating you, and the example they're setting that we should treat you the same way, and we should do what we can do in our circle of influence. And there's some listeners that wish our church did more. And if you feel that way, that's okay. I've sort of taken the feeling that I'm supportive of our church, our leaders, our doctrine, our teachings. And as we make improvement church-wise in this space, it'll come from our leaders and come from the impressions they feel from Heavenly Father. But what I can do is just be supportive of them, but also consider what I can do in my circle of influence to lift the burdens of others and connect with people like both of you that are working in the same space to lift the burdens of others. There's a lot of people we've given shout outs to. If you're part of this LDS coalition or non-LDS that are listening and you're behind the scenes, we thank you too for your efforts. This is a multiple effort, not just, but if you want to hear more about the Phillips story, Monica and James, they've been on the podcast. They're episode 230. The Braddocks are episode 233. You could hear more about their story. We mentioned Mayor John Giles, Republican LDS mayor, who was one of the key architects of this. He was on Faith Matters episode 75. Julie and Jeremy Spilsbury. Julie is the councilwoman or council person. I don't know. I assume we call people, but they were on episode 77 of Faith Matters. But the most important thing you can do, even though I've given you a lot of links, is go to equalityandfairness.com. So don't go to anything else I've told you to go to. Before you go to first, equalityandfairness.com. I'm on the page right now. There's a sign that says open and join us today. And just do that. And that's the reason these two good people took time out of their very busy schedule to be on the podcast, is connect you with their work, even though there's kind of a lot of sub stories going in as part of this podcast. Any final things you want to say? Otherwise, just anything else, Michael or Angela?
Simply, we're just so grateful for the opportunity. And Richard, to your point, our friends and leaders in the LDS Church haven't just seen us for who we are. They have loved us for who we are. And we are better because of our friendships. And we do hang out together. We like to have pizza and Greek salad together. Shout out. There's a little code in there, because sometimes you need a good Greek salad with friends that you love. But we're absolutely just so grateful for this opportunity. So thank you.
We are. I just want to echo that, Richard. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, for caring about this work that we're doing, for caring for all of our communities. And to Monica and James, thanks for connecting us. And just a big shout out of love and thanks and gratitude to our friends in the LDS Church. It has been such an incredible experience, the most incredible experience of my life, working with the LDS community and the LGBTQ community together. I want to share that I have a testimony of what you shared, Richard, that we are all made in God's image. He makes us like who we are, just like we are, on purpose. We're all here to serve that purpose. And I have a testimony of this church and the fellowship of it. And I have so much gratitude for being able to do this work with both communities. It's the best thing. I think it's the purpose that's why I'm here. So I just have a lot of gratitude for that. Thank you.
That's great.
And I want a final shout out to my friend Angela, who this work would not be the same without you, buddy. I just adore you and respect you with every fiber.
All in, my friend, all in. It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Well, listeners, we'll sign off. This is Michael Soto, Angela Hughey, Hughey. I don't know if I ever said your name. And Richard Ostler from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.